You're living in a world where a friendly smile can hide a knife behind the back, and sometimes the only thing standing between being cautious and being the next victim is awareness. Every day, danger lurks, not from strangers, but from familiar faces, friends, lovers, even family. And the scariest part? The threat doesn't yell, it doesn't show up in obvious ways. It smiles. Sounds dramatic? Maybe. But by the time you've heard these 5 warning signs, you'll understand why spotting them might be the difference between safety and harm. In an age where every move leaves a digital trace and relationships are more complex than ever, the predators don't look like villains in movies. They sit quietly beside you, hiding in plain sight. This isn't just a scare tactic. This is how you protect yourself. It starts right here, right now. Sign 1. They're studying you. They say paranoia is the enemy of peace. But sometimes it's not paranoia at all. It's perception sharpened by wisdom. One of the first and most dangerously overlooked signs that someone may want you dead is their quiet observation. Not the dramatic movie-style stalking, but a slow, calculated study of your life. It begins with small things. Someone who seems to always know where you've been, what you're doing, or who you've seen, without you ever telling them. You might shrug it off at first, thinking it's coincidence or harmless curiosity. But that's how it starts. The normalization of being watched. This kind of person doesn't strike out of emotion. They plan. They don't want you to see them coming because their goal isn't just your harm, it's your erasure without suspicion. In psychology, this behavior falls under pre-offense surveillance, a phase where the aggressor collects intimate data about your routines, vulnerabilities, and blind spots. They exploit the predictability of your life, what time you leave for work, where you get your coffee, when you're alone. Each habit you repeat becomes a string they pull tighter with every passing day. And the problem is, in today's digital age, you're giving them the tools. By tagging your location, sharing your routines, or keeping public friend lists, you're unknowingly leaving a breadcrumb trail. Even apps that track your steps or daily habits can be weaponized. Surveillance isn't only about binoculars behind a bush anymore. It's done through screens, data, and silent pattern recognition. These people don't need to break into your home to invade your life. All they need is for you to keep living it openly. What's more disturbing is that these observers often hide behind smiles. They may be a neighbor, a co-worker, even someone from your social circle. The Stoic philosophers understood this reality well. Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it. But to react wisely, you must first see clearly. Stoicism isn't about being passive, it's about alertness without panic. To recognize that not everyone who smiles at you means well. That peace is preserved not by blind trust, but by careful awareness. There's a psychological cost to ignoring these signs, especially as we age. Older individuals often fall into routines. They find comfort in structure. But that structure, when too rigid, becomes exposure. A predator doesn't need speed. They need consistency. Your consistency. This is why so many victims report a lingering feeling of being watched, but only after the damage has been done. Their instincts whispered, but they silenced them, telling themselves not to be dramatic, not to overthink. Here's the truth. You're allowed to question when something feels off. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Change your routes. Vary your schedule. Don't overshare online. Review your privacy settings. Do not make yourself easy to map. Even something as simple as turning off your location services or delaying your social posts can break the pattern a predator relies on. Ultimately, the Stoic response to danger isn't fear, it's preparation. It's stepping back from naivety and embracing responsibility for your own safety. In a world where surveillance is easy and motives are often hidden behind warmth, your greatest power is your unpredictability. Stop living so loudly, move with intention. And if something doesn't sit right, listen, because the difference between being paranoid and being prepared could be your life. Sign 2. They build a trap with love. There's a particular kind of danger that doesn't come with a weapon. It comes wrapped in warmth. It's not a threat you can see coming because it whispers instead of screams. It comforts while it poisons. This is the second and perhaps most insidious sign that someone may want to destroy you, not quickly but slowly, by stripping away everything that protects you. It's emotional manipulation. And the truly dangerous manipulators don't look like villains. They look like helpers. A man named Thomas, in his early 60s, learned this too late. After the loss of his wife, he found himself overwhelmed with grief and, for a time, very alone. That's when a woman named Claire entered his life, kind, attentive, and always available. She helped him sort through bills, made meals, called to check in every evening. At first, Thomas thought he'd been given a second chance at companionship, but over time her kindness began to feel like a cage. She discouraged him from seeing old friends, claiming they didn't understand his pain. She constantly reminded him how fragile he was, how much he needed her. When he spoke of his grown children, she subtly questioned their intentions. Eventually, he found himself emotionally isolated, dependent on Claire's approval for every decision, from his medications to who he was allowed to speak to. This is not love, this is a strategy. The emotional manipulator doesn't want your death in the literal sense, not yet. What they want first is ownership of your thoughts, your fears, your decisions, and in some cases, yes, your eventual demise, once they've drained you of autonomy, trust, and strength. The path they lead you down isn't filled with rage, but with quiet erosion. The Stoics warned us not to confuse comfort with goodness. True virtue isn't about how someone makes you feel, it's about what they do when they think you're vulnerable. Psychologically, this manipulation hinges on 3 pillars: weakness, dependency, and isolation. The manipulator identifies your emotional soft spots, your loneliness, your grief, your regrets. Then they present themselves as the only one who understands you, who stays when everyone else leaves. And once that connection forms, they slowly pull you away from anyone who might challenge their hold. Friends are painted as selfish. Family becomes a source of drama. You begin to believe that your survival depends on the very person who's been orchestrating your collapse. In Thomas's case, the realization came during a family dinner. His daughter asked a simple question, why he hadn't returned her calls. Claire interrupted and answered for him. In that moment, he realized he hadn't spoken freely in weeks. His voice was no longer his own. That's when it hit him. She wasn't protecting him. She was preparing him. For what? He didn't know. But the sense of danger was undeniable. From a Stoic lens, this is the ultimate test of clarity. Seneca once said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." The emotional manipulator feeds on your imagined weakness, your belief that you can't stand alone. But the truth is, your independence is your greatest defense. Reclaiming your voice, even when it shakes, is the first act of survival. To free yourself from this web, you must first recognize it. Pay attention to anyone who isolates you under the guise of protection. If someone makes you feel incapable without them, if your world feels smaller since they entered it, this is not support. It is subjugation, and you must walk away, even if it feels like cutting off your last lifeline. The Stoics didn't preach cold detachment. They taught emotional discipline. Love freely, yes, but see clearly. Your peace is not something to trade for temporary comfort. And if someone is wrapping chains in the language of care, you must be brave enough to recognize the prison being built around you. This isn't about fear, it's about freedom. Emotional manipulation is the slowest kind of death, of thought, of choice, of self, and recognizing it might just save your life. Sign 3, they want your assets. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Epictetus. Yet ironically, it's not always poverty that leads to danger. Sometimes it's wealth. Or more precisely, it's what your resources represent to someone else: control, leverage, a future they believe they're entitled to. The third critical sign that someone might want you dead is hidden behind the mask of financial help. It's not aggression, it's administration. A paper trail, a series of small favors, all wrapped in legal language and emotional manipulation. And by the time you realize what's happening, they've already written themselves into the ending of your life story. It starts innocently. Someone close to you offers to help with your bills. Maybe they recommend putting their name on your emergency contact forms or ask to be added to a financial account, just in case. They're full of good advice. Combine accounts, simplify paperwork, maybe consolidate assets under one name, yours and theirs. It sounds smart, even responsible. Especially as you get older, you're told it's wise to let someone help manage your affairs and prepare for the unexpected. But what if the helper isn't there to protect you? What if they're laying the groundwork for total control, control that outlives you? This is the mind of the resource controller. They don't seek drama, they seek documentation. Their power doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from contracts, keys, and slow, calculated influence. They're not robbing you in the middle of the night. They're walking you, step by step, into a situation where every asset you've earned and every choice you thought was yours no longer is. Psychologically, these individuals operate from a space of covert dominance. They're not interested in your well-being, they're interested in your usefulness. And that usefulness increases when your resistance decreases, when you're aging, grieving, lonely, or simply tired of paperwork and adult decisions. They sense the fatigue, the confusion that creeps in as responsibilities pile up, and they position themselves as the solution. But every piece of access you give, your bank accounts, your will, your home, is one less piece of autonomy you own. Stoicism speaks directly to this vulnerability. It teaches us that true peace comes not from clinging to external things, but from internal clarity. When you know who you are and what you value, it becomes easier to protect your boundaries, even when the pressure to surrender them is disguised as care. As Marcus Aurelius warned, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In other words, you must evaluate not just what people do, but why they do it, and what you're risking when you say yes out of guilt, fear, or fatigue. The elderly are particularly targeted, not because they're weak, but because they're predictable. Predictability is fertile ground for long-term manipulation. The resource controller doesn't need to rush. They want a clean ending, one that looks like a natural death, followed by a seamless transfer of assets. They want your friends and family to believe that you chose them, that you trusted them, and when the time comes, the signature on the dotted line says you did. So, how do you protect yourself? First, awareness. Understand that someone overly involved in your financial life without a legal or professional reason might not have your best interests in mind. Second, delay. Don't make decisions quickly. Slowness in this context is strength. Third, diversify your support. Don't centralize all trust into one person, especially not someone who insists they're the only one who understands you. Above all, remember this. True support never demands control. It offers help, but respects distance. It doesn't rewrite your future under the banner of love. If someone is encroaching on your financial independence, framing it as responsibility, while steadily excluding others from the conversation, you're not being cared for, you're being claimed. And if that makes you uncomfortable, it should. Because when someone wants you gone, they don't always need violence. All they need is paperwork, timing, and a victim too polite or too trusting to say no. Sign 4, they poison your circle. Did you know that in high-conflict divorce cases, the most common tactic used by manipulators isn't legal warfare, but social sabotage? It's called triangulation, and it's a psychological strategy where a person turns others against you, not with force, but with subtle, consistent influence. And this same tactic is used by far darker minds, those who intend not to hurt your heart, but to erase your life. Welcome to the fourth critical sign that someone may want you dead, the network infiltrator. Unlike the violent predator or the overt manipulator, this one operates in silence. They don't raise their voice or point a finger. They don't threaten directly. Instead, they become the master puppeteer, pulling strings you didn't even know were connected to you. They don't attack you head-on. They infiltrate your life by poisoning the people around you, friends, family, co-workers, neighbors. They don't need to destroy you themselves. If they can get the people closest to you to question your stability, your morality, your very character, then the work is already done. They begin by identifying who matters most to you, the people you rely on emotionally, the ones you turn to when you're uncertain or vulnerable. Then, with surgical precision, they begin to introduce doubt. Maybe they mention how worried they are about you to your closest friend. They might express concern to your family, gently implying that you've changed, become distant, erratic, maybe even unwell. In a workplace, they might whisper to colleagues about a mistake you didn't make or suggest you're no longer up for the job. And the most terrifying part? It's so quiet you barely notice it's happening. You might just feel a shift at first, fewer calls from friends, tense silences with family. Co-workers who once shared coffee now barely make eye contact. The air grows colder around you, and you can't quite explain why. But by the time you recognize the pattern, it's often too late. You are standing alone, isolated from the very people you once trusted to protect you. This is not coincidental, it's design. The network infiltrator is a master of what can only be described as social assassination. They don't want just to isolate you. They want to make it look like you isolated yourself, so that when something happens to you, no one will question the narrative. In fact, they'll assume you brought it upon yourself. From a Stoic perspective, this is the enemy of virtue, not simply because it undermines your peace, but because it seeks to destroy the external support necessary to live a principled life. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But how do you stay tolerant in the face of someone quietly destroying your reputation? The Stoic doesn't respond with rage, but with clarity. When you see through the tactics, you must act, not react. You must strengthen your internal calm while reinforcing the integrity of your relationships with directness and truth. The psychology behind the network infiltrator is disturbingly logical. They operate from control, not chaos. They know that if they isolate you, their final move, whatever that may be, won't be met with resistance. There will be no one left to fight for you. No one to even suspect foul play. Because by then, they've crafted a version of you that's easy to forget. If you start noticing that trusted relationships are beginning to falter without cause, if others are suddenly questioning your motives, doubting your words, or keeping their distance while someone else appears to grow closer to them, do not ignore that pattern. This isn't about paranoia, it's about preservation. You are not being dramatic, you are being targeted. The solution? Step back, but with awareness. Begin to observe who says what, when, and to whom. Rebuild your relationships with transparent communication. Confront subtle narratives with calm facts. Most importantly, do not allow your silence to validate their lies, because isolation is not just lonely, it's dangerous. And in this game of quiet manipulation, staying connected is not just a comfort, it's a matter of survival. Sign 5. They plan your accident. We now arrive at the fifth and most chilling sign, the calculated predator. This isn't about someone who might want you dead. This is about someone who has already decided how it will happen. They've mapped it out. calculated the timing, built the story, and rehearsed it until every move seems casual, every incident plausible. The most terrifying part? You probably already know them. You may have laughed with them, trusted them, let your guard down around them. But while you were relaxing, they were scripting your demise. Unlike the impulsive aggressor, the calculated predator doesn't act in rage. They act in cold, precise strategy. They don't wait for the perfect moment. They manufacture it. These individuals are psychological engineers. They test your awareness with unsettling subtlety. Maybe they forget to latch the gate to your backyard. Maybe they recommend you skip your seatbelt just this once. Maybe they accidentally unplug the space heater on a freezing night or nudge you toward a decision that places you in harm's way. One man named Alan, a retired Navy veteran, lived alone in a rural area. After his wife passed, a neighbor, a younger man who seemed helpful, began checking in often. He fixed Alan's plumbing, shoveled snow, offered rides into town. Alan appreciated the help, especially as his knees worsened and his energy declined. Then strange things started happening. His medications were mixed up. His garage door was found open in the morning. One day, Alan's car had a severed brake line, found during a routine inspection. The mechanic said it looked worn, but Alan had a gut feeling something was wrong. Still, he brushed it off. Until one night, he fell down the stairs. A loose rug, he thought, until he remembered the rug had been nailed down. His niece came to visit unexpectedly weeks later and began noticing odd patterns, documents missing, rumors in town that Alan had been depressed. And that same helpful neighbor, he'd already begun telling people how concerned he was about Alan's health and forgetfulness. Alan survived because his niece dug deeper, connected the dots, and reported the behavior. Authorities found forged financial documents in the neighbor's home. It hadn't been a matter of if, it had been when. This is the terror of the calculated predator. They don't just strike, they prepare. Every near miss is a test. Every lucky escape is their rehearsal. While you think you're clumsy or forgetful, they're crafting a narrative. They're making sure everyone believes your eventual downfall was inevitable, an accident waiting to happen. That's the genius behind their cruelty, premeditated plausibility. They suggest the hiking trail known for cliffside slips. They recommend that back road shortcut. They offer to drive you home, but drink just enough to blur your judgment. And they never make it look deliberate. They also build alibis in advance. They volunteer at the local food drive, attend church, appear endlessly supportive. They make sure people remember them as kind, concerned, helpful, someone who could never do harm. And when something finally does happen to you, others might even praise their loyalty. He always tried to help, they'll say. That's the script, and you've just been played. The Stoics taught us that we cannot control what others do, but we must control how clearly we see. As Seneca wrote, "A sword never kills anybody, it is a tool in the killer's hand." The calculated predator uses circumstance as their blade, disguising it as fate. And if you're not alert, if you ignore the tightening pattern of coincidences, you may become part of a performance staged to appear like bad luck. So if someone in your life seems unusually involved in decisions that affect your safety, if accidents seem to follow you when they're around, if they're offering help that feels just a little too convenient, listen to that unease. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition, and in some cases, it's your last line of defense. If you've made it this far, it means you're not just curious, you're awake. And that's more than most can say, because the truth is, these 5 signs, the silent observer, the emotional manipulator, the resource controller, the network infiltrator, and the calculated predator, aren't just theory. They're not suspense, they're strategy. Real patterns used by real people with real deadly intent. You're not paranoid, you're paying attention. And in today's world, that could be the one thing that saves your life. But awareness alone isn't enough. Now is the time to act. Strengthen your routines, lock down your privacy, write down what feels off, don't explain it away, build your circle with intention, and most importantly, listen to your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Too many people thought it could never happen to me until it did. Don't let your story become someone else's cautionary tale. This video isn't entertainment. It's a survival manual, and your journey doesn't end here. There's more you need to know, and it's waiting for you in the next video. So stay alert, stay smart, and hit that subscribe button, because your life might literally depend on what you learn next.